Without competent allies and enemies, there will be no point in playing. So, making AI that responds to players' actions is important. Here is the top 10 worst examples of developers failing to do this. While the Halo series is praised for many things, its friendly AI is not one of them. Don't rely on the Marines that accompany you to do anything particularly helpful, and they'll probably die soon anyway. And whatever you do, don't ever ask them to drive. You'd think things would be a little better when you have the other Spartans in your side, but even your super soldier allies in Halo 5 and Reach aren't the ideal companions you'd expect them to be. They struggle to take down enemies on their own, ignore you when you need help, and in general fail to understand your commands. It's particularly disappointing in Halo 5's case, since the game director previously worked on Star Wars Republic Commando, a game with legitimately good AI. What happened? And no, the other Spartans are no more capable of competently driving a vehicle than the Marines are. Allies in Halo may not be able to drive, but at least you can opt to control the vehicle instead. The same can't be said for the trafficking missions in Saints Row the Third, where you're forced to ride with Zimos in the driver's seat. These missions are among the most frustrating in the entire game, and it's all because of Zimos. Since he's required to drive, you'd think his AI would be good at it. Not so. Zimos can't drive. An average drive with Zimos could easily result in him driving into cars, hitting trees, flipping the car upside down, not understanding how to make a 3-point turn, and driving forward into the same wall over and over again, due to his apparent inability to turn. But at least if he's in a car, you have a chance. If he's outside during a firefight, it might never occur to him to get back in and drive you to safety. For the most part, Starcraft's AI is fairly decent. Your units go where you expect them to go, and fight what you expect them to fight. But while their combat skills are up to par, their navigational abilities can be somewhat lacking. Order them to a location without giving them a strict path, and they might end up places you never intended, while some mill about in confusion. Choke points are the worst. Rather than spread out to make sure everyone behind them gets through, they'll often block their own allies and let the enemy slowly pick them off. As one of the rare examples on this list where it isn't your allies that you'll have to be scratching your head, the enemies in Rainbow Six Vegas 2 can be mind-bogglingly stupid. There are certain locations where your enemies really want to climb down a specific wall or follow a certain path, to the point where you can camp beneath it and take them out one by one. Even as the bodies form a huge pile, they'll keep coming, undeterred. On the other hand, the friendly AI isn't much better. While your enemies might line up for you to kill them, your allies rarely seem to grasp the concept of cover, or think to heal allies and shoot enemies unless you specifically order them to. At least when your enemies and allies both have such poor AI, it balances the playing field a bit. Resident Evil 5 sent Chris on a mission with a new ally named Shiva. If you didn't have a friend controlling Shiva, she would be under the control of AI so terrible that some players feel co-op is the only reasonable way to play the game. Whether she's using important healing items when you take minor amounts of damage, wasting bullets by trying to shoot through you, fortunately there is no friendly fire, running off to fight other enemies when you could really use some assistance, or standing by idly as you hit the button asking for help. Shiva became infamous among players for being more of a liability than a worthwhile companion. I even heard a rumour that they unpurposely made her that bad for the sole reason to push the co-op feature and double some sales. It's a pity since the character herself wasn't bad, and yet few fans remember her with fondness. While Shiva might make players question her intelligence, Tails from Sonic 2 often gives the impression he's trying to make the two of you fail. As you zip through the levels, Tails will follow, at his own pace. Along the way, he'll collapse ledges and trigger parts of the level before you want him to, run into spikes, and even steal your air bubbles when you're swimming underwater. Then there are the special stages, when you are supposed to grab as many rings as possible and avoid the bombs. You will lose more rings to Tails repeatedly hitting bombs than to anything else. If he isn't trying, he certainly puts on a good show of it. While the Dead Rising series is beloved, its survivors are less so. It's a miracle these people survived as long as they did without you, because once you're in the picture, they're incapable of handling anything on their own. If they try to follow you, they'll lag behind, sometimes get stuck, and possibly veer into a group of zombies and need to be rescued again. Yet you can't leave them behind, because they can barely defend themselves even if you give them weapons. If you manage to keep them with you and protect them, don't relax just yet. There's always a chance they'll jump straight into your line of fire. You can cut the Dead Rising survivors a little slack for being under extreme amounts of stress and trying to survive an incredibly dangerous situation, but Sims don't have such an excuse. The Sims may have a fairly normal, safe environment, but these characters are clueless. On one hand, this is intentional. It demands micromanagement. On the other hand, you have to look at the Sims and wonder if there's anything going on in their brains at all. If left to their own devices, Sims will light their homes on fire, fail to understand the concept of walking around objects, and generally find creative ways to die, even if you aren't watching out for them. It's even possible for Sims to die because they become too hungry to sleep, but also too tired to eat. Yikes. What a way to go. The original Wolfshan's 1944, a World War II game inspired by real events, can only be played by many people as an import title, so few of you have probably had the pleasure of confronting its AI. While the AI opponents try to fight back, they don't know enough to move. This means you can toss a grenade from around the corner while your enemy passively takes the blows and occasionally shoots at the wall. No corner? No problem. Slowly strafing back and forth is just enough to dodge their shots, and since they're so slow, it shouldn't be a problem to shoot them while they're still thinking about it. If the real Nazis fought the way these do, World War II would have ended a lot sooner. Before we move on to the top game, we'd like to give two honourable mentions to AI that aren't quite bad enough to make it to the list, but have annoying quirks worth pointing out. The first honourable mention goes to Donald from the Kingdom Hearts series. While tweaking his settings helps, Donald often likes to use all of his magic at the start of the battle, rather than conserving it. Don't worry though, he'll still remember to heal you, usually 1 second after you give up and heal yourself. The second honourable mention goes to Silent Hill 4. During the second half of the game, Eileen Galvin joins you as an AI companion. Although she can't die, the damage she takes influences which ending you get. But unfortunately, she has no sense of self-preservation. If you equip her with a weapon, she'll attack any enemy no matter how outmatched she is, leading to an odd situation where it's often beneficial to leave her unarmed. And in the PC version, the AI is riddled with bugs and glitches that frequently leave the main protagonist, Walter Sullivan, happily wandering in circles instead of pursuing you like the nemesis he's supposed to be. There are many things wrong with Ride to Hell Retribution, and its AI is no exception. The enemies you face are theoretically fighting you, but they're more likely to run towards you than to hide behind cover when you shoot them. Melee combat is much the same, with enemies who half the time let you beat them up without putting much of a struggle. Sometimes they run sideways, sometimes they completely ignore you, and often they don't even react to being shot unless you shot them in the head. Motorcycle battles are limited to the same QuickTime event being repeated in the same way, since it never occurs to them to try different strategy, although sometimes your enemies can keep riding their motorcycles some time after death. Sadly, this is one case where the nightmarish AI isn't just something you should just ignore to enjoy the rest of the game. Everything in Ride to Hell Retribution saw the same loving care and attention that went into its AI, making it a game many people consider to be one of the worst ever. I hope you enjoyed this week's list, and if you did, leave a like, and if you want to see more in the future, subscribe. And if you want more top 10s now, click here for my top 10 most brutal deaths in video games, or for something lighthearted, click here for my top 10 rarest PS1 games.